Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make the easiest quilted bag ever. No pattern, hardly any measuring, just a pile of scraps and a little sewing magic. This is a fun, beginner-friendly project that's perfect for using up leftovers and making something cute, functional, and totally unique to you. So if you're new here, I'm Katie. I create cozy, sustainable sewing and embroidery projects that help you slow down and get creative. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if that sounds like your vibe. Now, let's jump into this quilted scrappy bag. This is going to be a two-part series. So, in part one, we're going to go over supplies and equipment, quilting the top and bottom, sewing the front to the back, boxing the corners, and making the lining. But if you're anything like me, you probably want to know all the steps before we get started. So, take a screenshot of this so that you know all the steps that are coming up next. Okay, so first things first, let's gather supplies needed for the entire project. We'll need our fabric scissors or pinking shears, rotary cutter, thread scissors, cutting mat, marking pen, cutting ruler, sewing machine, which should be oil and threaded. Then we're also going to need our fabric scraps, our optional patch, batting, bag lining, and then we'll also need fabric and batting for the straps. Here's where you get to choose your own adventure. You can choose to make a small bag, a medium sized bag, or a large bag. For this bag, I chose to make a medium-sized bag, so I cut two pieces of batting that are 17 by 17 inches, and then my lining will be 1 inch smaller all around, so 16 inches by 16 inches. Next, let's quilt the outer bag. Start by sewing your first scrap or your patch face up directly onto the cut piece of batting. I started with my cat patch directly in the middle of the batting, and then I sewed a couple of straight lines on all four sides. I wanted to make sure it was really secure on the bag and that it wouldn't be floppy. I didn't worry too much about straight or even lines. I just wanted this to be fun and make it look really scrappy looking. But if you really like straight lines, for sure, do some markings or make sure that it's a little bit straighter. Also, you'll probably notice that I didn't do any reverse stitching when I start or end a line, and that's because I'll be sewing over these stitches later, which will secure the stitches and make the top stitching more streamlined and clean, in my opinion. Then take your next scrap and place it face down on the edge of your patch or one side of the last scrap sewn onto the batting. Attach with about a 1/4 inch seam. You should be sewing through 3 layers: this new scrap, which is face down, the last scrap, which is face up, and the batting. You'll cut off the thread ends, flip the scrap open, press, and then sew a few lines to secure the scrap to the batting face up. Keep repeating this process until the batting is fully covered. This is a super relaxing and fun part of this project. You can get really creative with the color scheme and pattern here. The first scrappy bag that I made, I just sewed all the scraps on straight and it looked more or less like a log cabin pattern. And so with this bag, I wanted to use up all the jelly roll scraps that I had, but I didn't want this one to look so symmetrical or like a log cabin. In this case, I'm sewing all these strips of fabric on at different angles. This is more or less my attempt at being sort of lazy and not wanting to use a whole bunch of different like size scraps, but also making this look a little less like a log cabin. This actually still looks a little too much like a log cabin for me, so I think the next one that I do, I'm going to use some different size scraps, maybe a couple of triangles and some weirder shapes to see, just how it turns out. So you're going to continue this process of sewing and quilting and just like cutting scraps and putting it on willy-nilly however you like in the design that you want until the batting is completely covered. You'll notice that there's a small strip of batting left uncovered here, and so I'm going to sew another long scrap on. And it's okay if that fabric overhangs the batting because we'll just cut that off in the next step. If there's less than a 1/4 inch of batting showing on the top, that's okay too, because that won't matter once we square everything up in the next step. I'm so psyched on how both the front and the back are turning out. I'm loving the bright colors and it's giving off this fun, summery vibe. The back quilted part also looks really cool, but that'll be covered up by the lining, so no one but you and I will ever get to see that. In the middle of filming this, I got this new magnetic phone tripod that I wear around my neck for better point of view shots. It was Saturday evening and I was having an adult beverage, and even with my somewhat intoxication, it was easy to figure out right outside of the box. I'm trying to invest into this channel and my filming setup gradually. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos for you, and I've learned so much in the last 6 months since I started Katie Cat Studio. Okay, so here's what you'll need to get your rotary cutter, cutting board, and ruler out. You're going to trim your quilted squares to match the lining size, or at least square everything up and then cut your bag lining so that it's the same size as the outer bag. The latter method is perfect if you're really adverse to measuring things. Make sure to square up both the front and the back of the bag because this will make the rest of the project a lot more fun and easy, and it'll turn out better in the end. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but I haven't been on social media since January of 2018. So that means I took nearly a 7 year break from any form of social media. And a lot has changed since then. I still don't have any personal social media, but I do really love having this YouTube channel because there's such a nice community involved. And it's a fun, creative outlet for me to craft, to see what other people are doing in crafting, and anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. Then we're going to place our quilted squares right sides together, batting face out. The two sides should be the same exact size at this point, nearly perfect. You should use some pins or clips to align everything so that you can sew the two sides and the bottom together. Make sure that you don't sew the top because that's going to be the opening of your bag. I decided to use my serger for this part, but you can also just straight stitch the top and bottoms together with the home sewing machine. Oh no. And this is the part where I realized one of my threads broke and I had to spend the next 20 minutes relearning how to thread my machine. But it all worked out in the end and it came out beautiful. Here's one of my favorite parts of bag making, boxing the corners. There's so many methods for this, but here's the one that I like. I like to flatten the bottom corner into a triangle. Basically, you want the seams on either side of the triangle to be lined up. And then I flatten that triangle out onto my cutting board and I line it up so that the corner is in one of the corners of the squares, and I measure out 2 inches and I mark a line. That mark line is where I'm going to be sewing next. I also suggest after you've marked this to put some pins or a couple of clips in to keep your fabric lined and it doesn't get all bunched up in different places. And since I'm serging these corners, I'm going to cut off the end too, just to make it a little bit easier to get through my machine. But if you're straight stitching this, you don't have to do this part. You can just take off all of the excess fabric in the end afterwards. Look how cool this corner turned out. It's really making this bag to come together. And this is like the funny little piece of fabric that came off of the serger machine. I just wanted to show you.
Hey,
Once you finish boxing the corner
I'm
on one
just
side,
finishing
you're going
up.
to do the same thing on the other side, and then you're going to turn your bag right side out and bask in the glory of the outer bag that you have created at this point. And my partner came home in the middle of
Good.
filming this, and I didn't want to have to redo it, so you can just hear him talking to me in the background. And this must have been around dinner time because Bangle Space was getting a little feisty too. This scrappy little bag is really starting to look like a bag at this point, and now we're going to make the lining. You're going to do the same for the lining as you did for the quilted bag, except there's no quilting. Iron the fabric, cut it to the same size as the quilted outer bag after it was squared up. In this case, my lining came out to be 16 inches by 16 inches. Also remember, you need to cut two of the same size squares. So that's two 16-inch squares by 16-inch squares. With the two sides of the lining, right sides together, you're going to sew the two sides and then you're going to sew the bottom, but you're going to leave a 4 to 6 inch gap in the center. You'll use that gap later to turn the bag right side out. And excuse my poor etiquette right here, I could not for the life of me find my thread scissors. So at this part, you can see that I'm leaving that 4 to 6 inch gap at the bottom of the lining. And this is the very bottom part that you're going to turn inside out when we do a little bit of origami in part 2. Again, I'm using my serger, but you can definitely straight stitch this too. I'm also super in love with this fabric. I think they're delphiniums, but if you actually know what kind of flower this is, let me know in the comments because I'd love to know. I found this fabric at the Goodwill outlet bins and I'm super psyched on it. Now you should be boxing the corners like you did with the outer bag. You're gonna mark, sew, and trim. Okay, so this video is getting a little long and I'm going to finish up making the bag in the next video, which will include making the bag straps, sewing the lining to the bag, and then putting the finishing touches on. If you like this video and want to see how this bag turned out, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers by the end of this month and would be so thankful if you helped me out. If you want the full written instructions and a printable PDF, you can grab it for free in the link below and sign up for the Katie Cat Studio newsletter. You'll get early access to new patterns, sustainable sewing tips, and cozy creative inspiration in your email inbox. And if you're using this method to make your own bag or something else that's really cool, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know if you have any tips or tricks that make this process even more streamlined. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, done is better than perfect. What's up?